Welcome to the Conshy Coaching Podcast, where we take the concepts of mindset and energy leadership coaching and make them real so that you can get out of your own way, beat the burnout, and create a life and career that you love. I'm your host, Jenn Masse. Hello, and welcome to the 5th episode of the Conshy Coaching Podcast. Today, I have Lindsay Derecola joining me. Lindsay is a certified energy leadership coach who coaches individuals who want to ignite their creativity in a world where they may feel disconnected, stuck, or are struggling to find purpose in their work. In addition to being a coach, Lindsay is a mother, a talented graphic designer who personally helped me with my own logo, and she commissions beautiful hand-lettered designs through her Etsy shop. Lindsay actually coached me for 12 weeks as part of our school's peer coaching program. So I'm excited that I'll be the one asking her the questions this time. Lindsay, I'm so excited to have you on today's show.
Thank you. And I'm really excited to be a part of all this.
So I would love for you to introduce yourself a little bit further and tell us what you're doing now.
Sure. So full-time, I am a graphic designer and I have a passion for hand lettering in general, as you alluded to in your intro. And within the last year and a half, I sort of fell headfirst into the world of coaching. I started to pursue getting my certification to become a professional coach. And since then, coaching has really tied its way into how I'm developing my career path and how I'm navigating my life and relationships. In terms of what I'm working on now, next month, I will be leading a workshop for a local breast cancer support group around the concepts of brainstorming and sketching and how those creative processes can help to teach us to live in the moment. I was also just paired with a mentee or protege from the AIGA Philadelphia chapter's 2020 mentor program. So I'm really excited to be able to mentor and coach a young woman around developing her creative career in the next few months. In terms of some fun little projects, and I say little, meaning massive, knowing myself, I'm planning my daughter's second birthday party, which is themed to, spelled TWO, to infinity and beyond. So it's a Toy Story themed party for those that don't get the reference right away. I've saved a bunch of DIY decoration ideas to create for that, and I know that she's going to be super overwhelmed and excited when all of it comes together.
Yeah, and I can only imagine how big and grand you're going to make it. I remember seeing the designs from her first birthday party with Where the Wild Things Are, and those themselves were impressive. So can't wait to see what you do there. Very cool to hear that you're doing a presentation around brainstorming and creativity for a breast cancer support group, mentoring somebody and coaching somebody in the same creative field as you. And I would also love to just tie in the fact that you're still a full-time graphic designer, but how you are taking what you learned through your coach training and through working with your own coaches and applying it to your career to allow you to be a better employee, to be a better graphic designer, and to show up and advance your career. So there's just so many things that you can do with coaching, and that honestly, what you've done on your journey so far is just very impressive.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. So when were you first introduced to the concepts of energy leadership coaching?
So I would say a little over a year and a half ago, and this is, vulnerability city over here. But I was at a serious crossroad in my life emotionally. I was feeling like I was losing touch with myself. I was new to motherhood, adjusting to being a full-time working mom, and just feeling really torn up about where my career was at, and also trying to balance what it meant to be a working mom. And I was just emotionally tormenting myself about all of the guilt, the stress, anxiety, self-doubt, all of the negative possible feelings were going on for me at that point. And just in general, where my life was at professionally, personally, I was really wondering where it was all heading. I got to the point where I put a post on Facebook and said something along the lines of needing help or advice, clarity with my career, relationship, being a mom, basically life. So I put a metaphorical smoke signal out into the social media world saying, I'm overwhelmed by everything. Please help. And sure enough, a former coworker of mine messaged me privately and said, "Hey, it sounds like you would really benefit from a coach." I searched on the database she recommended. I found a coach located out of Pittsburgh who I actually never reached out to directly, but I read all of her blog posts. I listened to all of her podcast episodes, and then eventually just went down this rabbit hole of listening to her guest podcasts, so on and so forth. And this coach in particular went through some of the principles of coaching, the energy leadership concepts. So that was really my first exposure to it. And as I was listening to her talk about coaching, it was like my entire being just lit up and said, "Hello, wake up call. Here's your sign. Here's your calling. You need to be doing this." And that's when I decided to look into, the program that, you and I went through, and here we are.
Yeah. And you know what's so great about that is most people, myself included, Rob, who was on my last episode, and now I'm hearing it from you. So many people like to self-coach. They like to have the information available to them, finding somebody that they can connect to and learn on their own and apply the concepts on their own at their own pace. And honestly, that's one of the reasons that I feel it like my personal calling to even be doing this podcast and have my blog, because just making this information accessible to people, this new way of thinking, this new way of approaching your mindset and approaching your energy, it's so empowering that there is value to self-coaching. And I'm so glad that through your friend and through the One Idea Away community and through finding this coach out in Pittsburgh, you were able to get access to that because A, it allowed me to meet you, but B, I've just seen how much you've grown since joining the coach training program and working with coaches. There's just so much power to all of it. So I'm so grateful that, you found that coach out in Pittsburgh and that her blog and podcast were able to help you. As part of our coach training program, as you know, we do work with peer coaches. We're each assigned a peer coach so that we can not only get coached by somebody else, but we can also practice our coaching skills on other people. So you coached me, and I know how wonderful that experience was, having you guide me through some of my toughest decisions of leaving corporate, around that, the fears and gremlins that I had around my financial stability and fear of failure. And I'm curious, how was working with your peer coaches? How was that experience for you? And how did they help you continue to grow during your journey?
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more that the peer coaching kind of happened at the absolute best time of these pivotal moments. You had mentioned about shifting out of corporate to start your own business, which is huge. And I know myself, I was also making a lot of pretty big decisions myself. And even just like day-to-day things really helped tremendously. In particular, looking at some of the energy leadership index assessment debriefs that I underwent with peer coaches. So I believe it was 5 or 6 different coaches that had debriefed me on my assessment results. And even though each and every one of them had an identical report to debrief me, the really interesting part about all of it was, even though each of them had reviewed an identical report, they had a completely unique approach to how they debriefed me on my results. And each of them helped me to discover something new about myself. So I'll say that in ways each of them were helpful, where I felt more confident about who I was as a person. I felt extremely validated in how I was presenting myself to the world, and things that I was seeing previously as flaws really just were necessary pieces of the puzzle that was building my identity. And I feel like I got so much insight around how I show up under stress, and we really just started to look into why I was acting these certain ways and just really digging into that. So it was extremely beneficial for sure to be working with peer coaches.
Yeah. And you know what's so empowering about that energy leadership assessment is it's backed by science, and there's actual data on a page that shows us, as you said, how we react in a stressful situation, how we react in a good day. And then the rest of it is really just reliving it and being immersed in the mindset of like, okay, I see the numbers, but what does that mean for me personally? So helping you see that, these quote unquote flaws were really just judgments and necessary steps in your path to growth. And being debriefed by so many different coaches allowed you to continue to replay that and reprocess and redigest the information. So every time that somebody asks you, well, how do you see level 3 showing up in your life today, Lindsay? You were able to take another step back and be like, the other day I said this, but I actually think it's applying in this area of my life too. And what power could that be if I could shift that up to a 4 or a 5 or even a 6, which as a graphic designer and a creative person, your happy place is level 6, because that's where visionaries live. So I am curious, how did working with these coaches through the debrief, through coaching sessions, how did they help you kind of reconnect to some of those core values? Because you had mentioned early on that the whole reason that you even started this journey was that you lost who you were. You lost your self-identity. You were confused. You forgot your purpose. So how did your journey, the ELI debriefs, and working with a coach really help you reconnect and rediscover and reprioritize your core values so that you could show up as a more confident version of yourself?
Yeah. So I think the very first step is realizing, in part of sort of losing touch with myself and losing my identity in some aspects, just simply sitting down and saying, what is it that you value? That was like a game-changing moment for me, because in the ELI debrief, I was kind of making these connections of, I really don't put myself first enough. And it's been that way as long as I can remember. And part of that is, as some people like to call it, people pleasing. But, it's not that I'm just out to seek the approval and satisfaction of others. It's just part of my nature of wanting to serve others. That makes me feel valuable. So it's kind of taking that piece and reframing it and saying, okay, well, that's kind of one way to look at it, but what are other things that you value? So actually sitting through with a peer coach, I can recall one session where it was like, okay, so, you're having this interaction with this person, how do you feel that they support what you value, or something along those lines? And I was like, what do I value? And it was kind of this question of like, oh my gosh, I've never thought of this. So just going through and doing a values assessment to see what really matters, and rating currently how I'm living those values, and then comparing that to how I really want to be living those values. So I think even just starting with that bit was just game changing. And then moving forward into, okay, what are some ways that you can begin to have more of a relationship with yourself? What does that look like? And I feel like it just kind of snowballed into so much self-development. And that's something that I've honestly really been interested in for quite a long time, is how can I continue to improve, and how am I living out my purpose? So that's kind of a long-winded answer to your question.
Yeah. And you know what's so great about the fact that you did take the time to do that values assessment is, if you're interested in living your purpose, you really don't know what your purpose is unless you know what your values are, because the two are so closely related. And what's really cool about the whole energy leadership model, the first step is awareness. And once we're aware of how our energy is impacting us, and once we're aware of what our values are, we can start accepting things for how they are, which then allow us to make the conscious choice, which is, I think, what you were just hitting on, is once you knew what your values were, you could then make the choice to start prioritizing them a little bit more in your life, because you had the awareness of like, oh, you know what, that is important to me, and I'm going to make sure that I put that back into my life so that I can live the life that I want to live.
Yeah.
So of all of the different concepts and theories of energy leadership coaching, I'm curious, of all of this stuff that you were introduced to, what has helped you or resonated with you the most?
So I know I already began talking about this in some of my previous responses, but what has resonated with me the most has been studying the 7 levels of energy in regards to debriefing others on their ELI assessment results, as well as being debriefed. It's One tool that I feel is completely applicable to anyone, and you mentioned earlier about that the report is really backed by science, and so I think that can really appeal to people that are the data driven individuals, or that they're like, show me the data, show me the numbers. But it also can really appeal to those that are more of the free flowing kind of spiritual individuals. And really, ultimately, everyone has the potential to tap into any of the 7 levels of energy. And having the understanding of those levels and then how we can elevate ourselves into those higher levels, I think is really key for self-awareness, as you were saying earlier, with awareness being the first step. But it's also really great for being able to start to empathize with others and then eventually helping them to make a shift, as things are coming up. So I'd say that has definitely resonated with me the most, for sure.
Yeah, and I think you just hit on something with the empathy point, which is once you have an awareness of the 7 levels of energy and how they show up for you, it actually makes it a lot easier to connect with other people, because you can start to self-assess what energy level they're approaching a situation with, so that you can meet them where they are. And then if where they are isn't adding value to the end goal, by recognizing where somebody is, and you can start providing them with options that come from the other 7 levels, depending on what really serves the end goal. So I think you really hit on something there with meeting somebody where they are and being empathetic.
Yeah. And one thing too that came up for me as you were talking was that in this program, we begin to shy away from judgment and, having that be more of a default reaction to things. And in learning these 7 levels of energy, you kind of shift from judgment to observation or identification. So you're sort of like, okay, I'm not judging that behavior or that reaction, but I'm seeing that as being a lot of level 2 energy. And like, how can we address that, help this person, feel that, go through it as they need to, and then wherever they need to shift, get them there. So that I just kind of made that connection as you were talking.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually one of the core foundation principles, which is everybody's journey is unique and everybody's journey has value. So to your point of non-judgment, it's maybe self-assessing what energy level you think they're bringing, but approaching it with an open mind and meet them where they are with non-judgment, but acceptance and heart-centeredness and everything that goes with it, and just better energy rather than the judgment, which is really catabolic.
Mm-hmm.
So I just mentioned one of the foundation principles. So I'm curious, which one resonates with you the most?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, being 33 of them, I have not had them memorized. So I was going back through my handy little book of foundation principles and just reviewing them, which was an awesome refresh. And it was like, if you ever want to be uplifted, that's one resource to go to, that's for sure. But as I was going through, the one that stood out to me was each moment describes who you are and gives you the opportunity to decide if that's who you want to be. So I think that principle is super powerful. At least that one really stood out for me in relation to the 7 levels of energy, and just thinking about that idea that in every moment we have a choice. And that choice does not have to define us indefinitely, but it will certainly set up the path for the next choice that we make, or how we show up to every single interaction, relationship, scenario after that. And in essence, what this is saying is in every moment, you can reinvent yourself if you choose. And if we allow ourselves to, we can continue to build on the last moment. And as I was beginning to say, if we compare this to the 7 levels of energy, every person has the ability to shift between these 7 levels. So if you're someone who hangs out in higher levels of energy on a regular basis, and then you find yourself dipping into a lower level, it's okay. It's a part of the process. Every moment describes who we are, and we're given the opportunity to decide if we want to let that moment define us, or if we want to take it as a learning opportunity to make a change.
That is literally my favorite foundation principle. So I am so glad you brought it up, because that's the one that I think gives us the freedom and the empowerment to make choices and to realize that in any moment, even if you don't think you have a choice, you have a choice. And it gives us the ability to take off our blinders and truly look around and see, is this who I want to be? And if not, then who do I want to be? And let's go do that. So my heart is singing right now, Lindsay.
I didn't even plan that.
Yeah. The greatest freedom is the freedom of choice. And this foundation principle really underscores that, which is you have the power to change who you are whenever you choose to do it. So just because you're like, oh, well, they expect me to get angry here, so I'm going to get angry here. They expect me to be optimistic even when all hell is breaking loose. You don't have to be. You can choose who you want to be. Like you said, if you typically hang out on a higher level, you can choose to dip into catabolic energy for a little bit if you want to get frustrated, if you want to be taken care of for a little bit. And then same thing, if you tend to hang out in the lower levels, you can make that choice to be like, you know what? I'm done being tired. I'm done being angry. I'm ready to be happy. I'm ready to experience joy. So what can I do? Because I'm choosing now to move forward in my life. So on that front, I'm curious, for 2020, what's one intention that you have set for yourself?
Yeah, and I love that you've asked about intentions versus resolutions. Not that there is absolutely anything, negative to say against resolutions, but I've found for me, they don't work. So setting intentions has been something that I've kind of strived for instead of trying to make these grandiose goals for a whole year. To your question, my main intention for 2020 is to focus on presence over perfection. And ultimately, what this means for me is just show up. No matter how prepared you are, or if you're not prepared at all, just show up. Even if there is any self-doubt, go through with it anyway. I've realized that I can be and have been my biggest barrier for my own development, and I've recognized that I need to dial it back. And this all comes back to knowing, like I was saying earlier, with being a chronic procrastinator, but when I break it down, thinking about the causes of all of these things, it really comes down to fear or, not having the confidence in myself. So rather than, sitting there and wallowing in self-pity, it's like, push it aside, show up, because you never know what opportunities are going to be waiting for you. And honestly, that's kind of something that I really kind of had this epiphany over at the last couple months of 2019, was just realizing like opportunities will show up when you least expect them. So if you're showing up, you're creating an even greater chance for those opportunities to meet you. So that's where I'm at. Presence over perfection.
I love it. Presence over perfection, and just show up. And there's so much power to what you just said about by just showing up, opportunities that you don't even know exist start to manifest themselves for you because you took that step past fear and you chose the opportunity and to do something rather than choosing non-action. So incredibly powerful intention. And I know that you'll do great at that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So before we wrap up, what is one piece of advice that you have for anybody that wants to live greater?
I will say that brevity is not my strong suit, so I have more than one piece of advice.
That's fine.
So I'll start with the highest tier of advice. It would be, if you don't have a coach, get one. Anyone and everyone can benefit from a coach. And if you look at it this way, there's no such thing as wanting to help yourself too much. If you have that ability to do so, do it. And if you can't afford to hire a coach for regular one-on-one sessions, at the very least, take the ELI assessment. And no, I'm not endorsed to say any of this stuff. I feel like I've brought it up so many times that I'm being salesy about it. But honestly, it's a tool that has helped me so much. And I would not say it and I wouldn't advocate for it if I didn't see the power in it myself, because I'm just very open and honest. So I am out here to help other people to really dig into who they truly are and what they truly want for themselves. So taking the ELI assessment is one action that will probably trigger a ton of possibilities in the realm of what you want to decide to work on. So if you're like, I don't really think I have anything to work on, I mean, if that's what you're thinking, kudos to you, because that's amazing. But guaranteed that assessment will help you establish something that you can begin to work on, because even the most self-aware people will gain new insights about themselves. And I think that this can really serve as a roadmap to your personal development, whether you decide to move forward with coaching following it or not. The last thing I would say, that even if the ELI is not an option, at the very least, you can create daily or weekly affirmations for yourself. And those can look like something as simple as I am statements. So an example could be you wake up one morning, everything seems to be going wrong. The day begins with stress, anxiety, all of that. You can try and reframe your day with creating an affirmation to come back to at any time that you're feeling that stress or anxiety. And really what the affirmation does is it reminds you that statement is there for you when you need it. I've heard of people writing affirmations on sticky notes and putting them in their car, at their desk, even at the top of every page in a notebook that they're currently using. I mean, it seems so simple, but really it's the small things like that that can make a huge impact. And once you repeat something enough, you start to believe it. So, at the very least, I think affirmations can be an excellent way to start to live greater.
I love that. And I have to honestly say the affirmation thing is so powerful. Our very first weekend when you and I were up in Shrewsbury for that first coach training module, somebody gave me one of those little quote cards and it said, "Make choices that liberate me." And in that moment, that was so powerful to me because I had always been making choices to please other people and was walking somebody else's path and so on and so forth. But earlier that day, a new rule I had created for myself was make choices that liberate me. So when somebody found this quote card and gave it to me, it spoke to me and I literally kept it on the dashboard of my car from the moment I walked out of that coach training to probably a couple weeks after I left my corporate job. I think I only moved it because I had my car detailed and I didn't want it to get ruined. But it literally, that affirmation, every morning when I drove to work, I had that reminder of make choices that liberate me, which at the time was make choices to have the right mindset and to bring the right energy to a situation that isn't necessarily ideal for you. And on my way home, make choices that liberate me. What can I do to get ahead in my coach training homework? What can I do to not let work show up in my home life so that I can be liberated? So 100% on that tip to come up with your own affirmation and post it everywhere that you need to post it so that you can have it serve as that reminder to raise your energy and show up the way that you want to show up.
Yeah, I love that.
So, Lindsay, that's all the time we have for today. I just want to thank you so much for joining me on the Conshy Coaching Podcast. I love working with you, and I'm looking forward to having you as a guest on future episodes so we can dive more into the energy leadership assessment. We can check in to see how you're doing with trusting the process and presence over perfection. Can't wait to have you back on here. And thank you again so much for spending your time with me today.
Oh, and thank you. It's really been a pleasure. I appreciate it. And I'm definitely looking forward to being back on your show again.
That was episode 5 of the Conshy Coaching Podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Lindsay Derecola, I've included a link to her website and Etsy page in the show notes. If you'd like to continue learning more about mindset and energy leadership coaching, please subscribe to my channel and join my weekly email list so that you never miss an episode or a blog post. If you're interested in taking the energy leadership assessment that Lindsay referred to, please visit my website at www.conshycoaching.com and you'll be able to find more information on that assessment. Thanks for listening and have a wonderful day.